Prayers.
Almighty God, who in your infinite wisdom and providential goodness has appointed the offices of rulers and councils for the welfare of society and the just government of man, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor us, your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to the performance of such important trusts in this country. Let your blessings descend upon us here in council assembled, and grant that we may, as in your presence, treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner to promote your honor and glory and to advance the interest you have committed to our charge. All which we ask in the name and for the sake of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, I request an amendment to the order paper to include oaths for the swearing in of the Honorable Financial Secretary acting, please.
Do we have a seconder for that amendment? I recognize the Honorable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I second the motion.
It has been moved and seconded that the order paper be amended to include oaths at number 2 and the subsequent renumbering of the other matters. All those in favor, say aye. Those against, nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The order paper will be amended accordingly.
Oaths.
I recognize the Honorable Acting Financial Secretary, but let us stand for the oaths, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, Alverna Weeks, do solemnly and sincerely declare and affirm I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles III and his heirs and successors according to law.
Confirmation of minutes.
Are there any corrections to the minutes, number 10, dated Tuesday, 30th September? If there are no amendments, can we have someone move the motion? Thank you. I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move a motion for the confirmation of the minutes as presented.
A seconder, please. Recognize the Honorable Deputy Premier.
Madam Speaker, I rise to support the motion for the confirmation of minutes number 10 of the 8th in Parliament dated Tuesday, 30th September 2025.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that minutes number 10 dated Tuesday, 30th September 2025 should be confirmed. All those in favor say aye. Those against, nay. Think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Minutes number 10, dated Tuesday, 30th September 2025, is duly confirmed.
Papers to be laid on the table.
I recognize the Honorable Acting Financial Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to lay on the table of this Honorable House the following papers appearing under the name of the Financial Secretary. Schedule of Virement Number 1 of October 2025-2026. SR&O Number 47 of 2025. Customs Duties and Consumption Tax, Oliver's Construction Limited, Exemption Amendment Order. SR&O Number 47 of 2025, Customs Duties and Consumption Tax, Alteration of Rate of Customs Duties and Consumption Tax, Christmas Barrel Order. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the Honorable Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to lay on the table of this Honorable House the following paper appearing under the name of the Attorney General. SR&O Number 46 of 2025, Police Disciplinary Tribunal Number 2 Order. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Reports from committees, ministerial statements, government notices, unofficial notices, questions.
I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have some questions for the Honourable Premier. Question 1. The Project Management Office PMO under your administration remains critically understaffed. This shortage of skilled personnel has contributed to repeated delays and poor implementation across several key projects, including the troubled Little Bay Port development and other critical works. Given the serious national impact of these failures, can you state clearly, A, why has the PMO not been fully staffed despite repeated commitments to strengthen project delivery? B, what immediate actions will your government take to recruit qualified technical staff and build the PMO capacity? C, how will you ensure that project implementation failures caused by inadequate oversight and coordination do not continue to cost Montserrat time, money, and public confidence?
I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, continued efforts have been made to recruit for the Project Management Office, with several offers being made to qualified candidates over the year. Unfortunately, as sometimes occurs, the offers were declined or accommodations requested by candidates could not be honored. The Ministry of Finance, working with the Human Resources Department, continues to progress recruitment efforts into this very critical office. It should be highlighted that while efforts are being made to recruit for the roles within the PMO, it would do the office and the people of Montserrat no favors to hire unqualified or underqualified individuals, as this may further hamper the proper oversight and coordination functions of the office. Madam Speaker, other avenues have been utilized to address the shortage of staff in the office. We have several highly trained project managers focus on the larger programs, such as the hospital and the port project. We are also seeking to upskill local talent by giving officers within the service an opportunity to lead on the project management and oversight on some smaller but critical projects. This will build local capacity and reduce dependence on external consultants.
I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Supplementary. Honorable Premier, the difficulty experience with recruitment to fill a position within the PMO, are they related to the cost or the amount of money that is assigned to these positions, or what are the reasons given, if you are aware of that, for these persons not taking up the recruitment offers?
I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, there are a range of issues which impact on hiring staff of this level of qualification. Most highly qualified individuals will apply for several jobs across the region. And by the time we get back to take up or make an offer, that person or those persons may have taken up an offer elsewhere. There's nothing we can do about that. It is what it is in the job market. We can't do anything about that. But what I can assure the honourable member is that many of the local projects, other than the port, which has a project manager, which we brought in from the port project in St. Vincent, the hospital has a dedicated project manager. All of the other projects are being managed using local expertise. So we are, in fact, although not having the staff in the PMO's office, offering other locals the opportunity to perform those functions.
I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Can the Honorable Premier state the meeting dates of the Micro and Small Business Committee and attendance of the committee over the last 12 months, confirming that all approvals met the quorum in section 3.5 and stating the most recent meeting date?
I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, apparently there's been some miscommunication, because the question which was submitted to me reads thus: can the Honourable Premier state the meeting dates and attendance of the committee over the last 12 months, confirming all approvals met the quorum in section 3.5 stating the most recent meeting date? Since there was no reference as to which committee, Madam Speaker, no substantive response is possible, as it was not clear as to which committee was being referenced.
If I may, Honorable Leader of the Opposition, if I may. Yes, I understand your position, Honorable Premier. This is the way the question came, but the adjustment that was to be made to it was not made. So it's no fault of the Honorable Premier. It's the preparation of the question. So I'm sorry, Honorable Leader of the Opposition that the micro and small business was not included in the way the question was submitted. So it is not his fault. I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, apologies accepted. Question 3, I hope that this question was received as I have it here. For financial year 2023-24 and 24-25, to date, can the Honourable Premier state the number of applications received, approved, declined by the Micro and Small Business Committee, type and value of exemptions granted, and anonymized distribution showing the range of benefits granted to similar situated applicants with reasons for any variance?
I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, again, the question which I received read, for financial year 2023 and 2024 and 24-25 to date, can the Honourable Premier state the number of applications received, approved, declined, type and value of exemptions granted, and an anonymized distribution showing the range of benefits granted to similar situated applicants with reasons for any variance? There was no reference to the committee in the question I received. However, Madam Speaker, other than to say the question posed is ambiguous and extremely difficult to answer, as the government of Montserrat grants multiple types of concessions across various programs and pieces of legislation. Madam Speaker, if the honourable member is referring specifically to import and consumption tax concessions, Section 19 of the Consumption Tax of the Customs Duty and Consumption Tax Act provides that the governor, acting on the advice of Cabinet, may grant such concessions. Technicians provide their recommendations to the minister, who then brings those recommendations to Cabinet. Cabinet subsequently deliberates and determines the level of concessions to be approved. A similar process applies to income tax and company tax concessions. Madam Speaker, Cabinet deliberations are confidential and not open for public scrutiny. Therefore, it would not be practical to provide the reasons for any variance in the amounts granted at this time. Additionally, Madam Speaker, as I was not a member of Cabinet nor government during the period 2023 to 2024, and for the majority of 2024-25, it would be imprudent of me to attempt to speak to the rationale for concessions granted during the period by another administration. Further, Madam Speaker, all exemptions are published and laid before this Honourable House and are therefore a matter of public record. In addition, the Attorney General's website and the Montserrat Gazette publishes these exemptions, ensuring full public access to the information. Madam Speaker, opposition members must stop being lazy and must do their research of information which is publicly available.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, I assure you that the opposition is not lazy and that we are well researched. And that this, with your permission, Madam Speaker, a supplementary.
Yes, a supplementary is allowed, but don't bother with the speech and debate.
Honourable Premier, given the number of concerns that have been expressed about inconsistent application and incentives and the potential for unequal treatment among similar qualified micro and small businesses, can you state whether your government will commit to publishing clear, accessible and binding guidance covering eligibility criteria, evaluate thresholds and standardized limits so that entrepreneurs can rely on a transparent, rule-based system rather than discretionary or ad hoc decision-making. Investors do not like discretionary ad hoc decision-making, especially when there is a Micro Small Business Act that clearly lays out what the incentives are for these businesses once they qualify.
I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, I don't understand what elucidation that supplementary is seeking to request. And I humbly acknowledge that it's a substantive question which I would urge him to bring up at the next sitting.
I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Will the Honorable Premier inform this Honorable House whether the Government of Montserrat intends to pursue a partnership compact with the United Kingdom as outlined in the Joint Ministerial Council communique, and if so, what priority areas the government proposed to include?
I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, the discussions on the compact or any likely compact have only just started. There has been no firm commitment on the commencement of discussions, nor the details, nor its format. As with the white paper, this document will be made public once we have started the process.
I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Honorable Premier, as leader of government business, you would obviously be aware of what the priority issues are. Supplementary, sorry, Madam Speaker, supplementary with your permission. And therefore, you would obviously have priorities. So can you outline a timeline for consultation with the public and this Honourable House on the proposed contents of the Partnership Compact and indicate when a draft is expected to be submitted to the UK for negotiation?
I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, as I had indicated, the compact is the discussions on the compact started at the recently concluded JMC. There has been no format, nor any formal movement on the compact, and when we have a formal movement on the compact in terms of what it is likely to look like, then we can have those discussions. I don't know what the compact looks like. I don't know what the proposal will be, but once we have further word from HMG on any such compact, then yes, we will always, as we do, have public discussions and consultations on such a compact.
I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Will the Honourable Premier state whether any discussions regarding constitutional advancement or review for Montserrat were raised at the JMC, and what commitments, if any, were obtained from the UK government?
I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, there were broad discussions on constitutional reform, but that is as far as it has reached. We have not had local discussions on constitutional reform. Hence, it would be premature to have more concrete discussions with HMG at this time. HMG has reiterated that any territory wishing to be removed from the UN decolonization list are free to do so.
I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Supplementary, Madam Speaker, with your permission. Will the Premier state whether the government intends to establish a constitutional review commission or public engagement process to advance any reforms or amendments of the Montserrat Constitution?
I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, the Constitution is not a government matter and cannot be addressed by the Premier nor the government itself. It's a matter for this Honourable House, as we have done for other documents, for the House to make a determination as to the way forward as it relates to any further constitutional discussions. And therefore, a committee of this House could be formed to effect such considerations. So I urge the Honourable Leader of the Opposition to reach out and let's have a discussion if they do have some concerns on it, so we can come back to this Honourable House to recommend a committee.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Will the Honourable Premier inform the House which specific national infrastructure gaps for Montserrat were identified and discussed at the JMC, and what assurances, financial, technical, or otherwise, were received from the UK to address these gaps?
I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, I am not in a position at this time to make public any discussions I've had in the UK with FCDO officials, especially at this time. There is the usual island discussions in January and February, which will cement any request for budgetary support. I am absolutely certain that the Honourable Member is aware of this as a former Cabinet Minister.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Will the Honourable Premier advise this Honourable House how Montserrat will benefit from the new climate finance support programme announced by the UK, including any immediate or short-term opportunities for climate adaptation, resilience building, and environmental protection?
I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, the Honourable Member, as is his nature, is a bit premature. A program which is being developed must move from an idea to documentation before implementation. However, I can inform this Honourable House that we have had an allocation of £5.9 million sterling for climate adaptation through green energy transition. I wish also to report that it has been programmed and all of it will be spent within the time frame on the projects which have been agreed, and these will be completed by March 31st of 2026.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Honourable Premier, the funds you received that you just explained, are these funds from the Climate Finance Support Programme? You did not specify that they were from some other area. Or are you just being premature?
I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, the Honourable Member must recognize when there is time for old talk, and this is not such a time. There is discussion taking place in HMG in terms of a climate resilient fund for the overseas territories. That has not as yet reached a stage where we can make application for any funds. The £5.9 million sterling for climate adaptation through green energy transition was a special allocation granted to us in June or July of this year with a terminal disbursement date or completion date of March 31st, 2026. So it's separate and apart from it, from the Climate Resilient Fund.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Will the Honourable Premier state what progress was made, if any, on the long-standing requests for overseas territory students, including those from Montserrat, to become eligible for UK maintenance loans while studying at UK universities?
I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, this matter was robustly discussed by all OTs and is being pursued with the FCDO. The same can be said for UK pensions residing in, or pensioners residing in the overseas territories.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Supplementary, Madam Speaker.
Yes?
Mr. Premier, can you clarify, are you saying that the matter is still not resolved? Or?
I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, the matter is under consideration by the Overseas Territories Minister who is leading on it, and we expect to have some very good traction both on that and on the pensioners that we've been fighting for over the past 30 years.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Montserrat's economic recovery depends on productive investment, new jobs creating enterprises, and support for local business growth. The public requires clarity on the government's results to date in this area. Can the Honourable Premier provide A, the number, type, and value of foreign and local investment projects approved or facilitated by the government in 2025, B, the number of jobs created or projected through those investments?
You leaving the other parts of the question?
If you want me to ask them one time, I could. You prefer that? B, the status and outcomes of the investment promotions unit established to stimulate economic activity, including performance KPIs. And C, what new investment incentives or reforms the government will introduce in 2026 to accelerate private sector development and employment.
I recognize the Honourable Premier, but I think this question has 4 parts, A to D.
Madam Speaker, I'll leave it at C.
I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, you'll forgive me for responding to all 4 elements of the question, which are before me. If he does not wish for me to respond to D, he can say so, but I've done a comprehensive response. Madam Speaker, this government is committed to growing our way to prosperity. The Honourable Member was a Cabinet Minister for 5 years and cannot provide a report for his 5 years on these same subject matters.
Madam Speaker, point of order.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. What is your point of order?
Madam Speaker, I asked the Premier a specific question. I didn't ask him whether I was a minister for 5 years, whether I provide report or didn't provide report, Madam Speaker. You need to stick to the answer to the question I posed.
Yes, Honourable Premier, I think you should stick to the question and respond accordingly. I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, I didn't realize that when a question is asked of me and I dutifully provide the responses within the timeline, that I cannot read the response.
This is not about the timeline, Honorable Premier. Answer the question that is posed, and let's move on. Thank you.
But Madam Speaker, the request of this Honorable House is that I provide a written response by a particular timeline. And, Madam Speaker, if you'll permit me, it also says that the response must be read. And I'm reading the response which I submitted to the opposition and to the Department of Legislature.
And I understand what you're saying, but if a statement is not necessary to make the response intelligible as used in the standing order, then you should omit it. Let us move on with the response, please. Thank you.
So, Madam Speaker, are you asking me, therefore, to take time and go through the written response which I submitted at this time and then come back and respond to it? Because I am reading what was submitted to the honourable member and there was no objection to it. I don't understand why I can't read my response.
I think he objected, if I may. That's why he rose on the point of order. I think he objected, and therefore we will continue without that statement. That is gone. Let us move forward.
Okay, Madam Speaker. This cabinet is committed to growing our way to prosperity. Madam Speaker, the honourable member was a cabinet minister for 5 years and cannot provide a report.
Honourable Premier, I ask you to leave that out and continue. That second sentence.
Okay, Madam Speaker.
If the Premier continue, then from this side, we're going to do the same thing, and you're going to turn out to be a nasty debate.
You're sitting while speaking.
Debate.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition, you're sitting while speaking. Let us not argue. Let us please continue with some...
Madam Speaker, I will continue. It was his administration who closed the MDC, which was...
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Yes, your point of order. Please stand. Your point of order.
Madam Speaker, again, the Premier continued to inject things within the answer that is going to stimulate argument. It's argumentative, and it has nothing to do with the question asked. And like all of us inside here, the Premier ought to follow the rules. Otherwise, none of us will follow it.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition, which rule has he breached? Let us go to the rule so that it can help me to make a decision. Which rule has he breached?
Standing orders 39(5), Madam Speaker.
39?
Yeah, 5B. No imputing improper motives.
(39) is on interruptions. No member shall interrupt another member who is speaking except by rising to a point of order. A member rising to a point of order shall simply direct attention to the point which he desires to bring to notice and submit to the Speaker for his decision. But this does not say which rule was broken. That is what I'm asking for. Can you help me to find it, please?
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Yes, your point of order, Honourable Romeo.
If I may assist, Madam Speaker.
Excuse me?
If I may assist.
Yes, your point of order.
Section 24(1). A question shall not contain arguments, references, questions, opinions, imputations, epithets, ironical expressions, or hypothetical cases, which means answers should not do the same either.
Thank you, Honourable Romeo. We are sticking to replies, and the rule says, 25 says, that a written reply to each question shall be read by the member to whom the question is put, and a copy of the reply shall be handed to the member putting the question, provided that with the consent of the Assembly, such written reply may be taken as read. That is what Rule 25 says. However, I am going to rule, Honorable Premier, that you do not include statements that do not really answer the question that is posed. So if we can move on in the best interest of this House and the benefit of the public, let us please do so in a decent and orderly manner. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, I see absolutely nothing within the rules of this honorable House that stipulates how a member ought to reply. There's a Madam Speaker, if you'll permit me. There's a stipulation as it relates to a question. And I have the opportunity to respond with background information as it relates to my response. And if I cannot read my response as it is written, I therefore will not respond to the question, because the ruling of the House is that the response must be read, and I am reading my response.
Fair enough, Honorable Premier, but going forward from today, do not...
Point.
If you may permit me.
I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, Madam Speaker. With your permission, Madam Speaker, I heard you made a ruling to move on and you asked the Premier what not to include. For the Premier to override that, Madam Speaker, Premier don't have the authority to override you.
Well, if you had not interrupted me, because that is what I was coming to ask him to move on, and going forward in providing responses, do not include, and this goes for every member, do not include statements that are unnecessary, that does not make the response intelligible. If it's not relevant to the question, let us not. Can we move on, please, Honorable Premier?
Madam Speaker, I must make a comment.
I don't think you have to make a comment. Let us move on with the responses.
So may I just read the response? Or do I have to now go through and seek to modify my response at this time, when in fact I followed dutifully the rules which establishes how I respond to a question?
Honorable Premier, I think you are the one who made the responses, so you should know what is coming up in the response, and if there are anything contained within the response that you don't have to mention in answer to the question, then I ask that you leave it out. Please. I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
Madam Speaker, I believe you have answered the Honorable Premier with Rule 25(2). A reply shall be confined to the points contained in the question, with such explanation only as will render the reply intelligible. And Madam Speaker, I'm finding the same problem with my questions to him. And I suggest, Madam Speaker, that all answers be placed on this table before we start, so you can review them and see whether the answers are actually out of order or not.
We will deal with that going forward. But Honorable Premier, please continue for the benefit of the House and in accordance with the rules.
Madam
Thank
Speaker,
you.
I think I need, with your permission, to respond to Honorable Romeo. My responses were submitted to the Legislative Assembly within the timeline as stipulated. So I don't understand why I'm now being accused of not following the rules.
Okay, fine. And as I said, we will deal with that going forward. So let us deal with the matter at hand. Continue with the response, please.
Okay, Madam Speaker. The embassy was closed, which was established to facilitate business developments on Montserrat. Everybody knows who closed the embassy. We have been in office for 12 months, and I think the question is unreasonable at this time, given the damage which was inflicted on Montserrat over the past decade. However, since coming to office, this cabinet and this government has rebranded the Trade and Quality Infrastructure Division to the Business, Trade and Investment Unit and recruited an experienced director to lead it. This reflects our commitment to developing the private sector through an approach that focuses on supporting our existing businesses and private sector operators, taking advantage of our regional position and trade opportunities, and refocusing our investment promotion and facilitation efforts. A business case is under consideration which, if approved, will deliver additional resources to this critical unit, including a dedicated investment officer. Following this, a full work program will be developed. However, Madam Speaker, that has not prevented us from making progress in the meantime. Since coming to office, this government has approved 10 applications through the Micro and Small Business Act, enabling investments in excess of $180,000. Micro and small businesses are the foundation of our economy, creating self-employment and new jobs. This financial support is critical to enhancing their ability to invest, grow, and become established. Madam Speaker, we are not stopping there. This government soft loan program will shortly make over $2 million of funding available to farmers, fishers, and micro and small businesses. These loans will be easily accessible and on favorable terms, providing capital for much-needed investments in the micro sector. We will go further by assisting these micro enterprises to learn basic business techniques. Additionally, a new policy framework for the formulation of concessions and incentives regimes is under development. This will deliver a consistent approach to concessions and incentives framework for our target growth sectors, ensuring these are effectively managed objectively and promptly at official level. This will be a significant boon to existing and new investors who seek consistency and regularity in how their investment efforts are handled. Madam Speaker, it would be remiss of me not to point out that we have two major investment projects underway, totaling over $200 million worth of investment. The new port and new hospital are creating scores of jobs directly and support many indirectly. As well, Madam Speaker, these are generating employment for local workers in areas such as carpentry, masonry, and steel fixing, and they're driving demand for materials from local suppliers and adjacent services from local service providers. And of course, Madam Speaker, once complete, these will reap much broader economic benefits through enhanced trade, tourism, and additional opportunities for private sector growth. We have also reopened St. George's Hill as a major tourism destination with 5 viewing sites. Local contractors have been engaged to erect the necessary safety barriers to facilitate this. And if I may add, Madam Speaker, I wish to compliment those workers for working over the weekend through rain, through dangerous conditions, to have had those developments completed by yesterday afternoon. We will continue these site developments in coming months with regrassing and slope stabilization, benches, and toilet facilities. If the honorable member was observant, he would have recognized a full water reticulation project in Palm Loop and adjacent areas. This has created some employment for both labor and equipment operators. The much touted Lookout sewage system, which he claimed over a year ago was going to collapse and overwhelm the community with brown stuff, is underway and will be completed by 31st March 2026. This is more than just talking. The spring sources have been upgraded and secured from animals. The glass-fused water tanks to increase our storage from 1 day to 3 days average have been delivered on island are in the process of being erected. The Drummond's apartment building has been contracted and work has commenced and will also be completed by 31st March 2026. The rehabilitation works on the Cultural Center have commenced with a completion date of 31st March 2026. The relocation of micro-enterprises at Carsby will soon be completed to include toilets and a safe parking area. Their business surroundings have been upgraded, and we will continue to assist in upgrading their business opportunities. As we speak, a group of potential investors are doing some additional exploratory work on a major investment proposal to be submitted early in 2026. Additionally, we have another company which is in the process of formalizing an agreement with government. A Canadian company has signed a letter of intent for the production of selected agricultural crops for export to the Canadian market. Finally, Madam Speaker, this administration promised a reduction of taxes for overtime payments to match what is paid on a person's base salary. I can confirm to this Honourable House that this promise has been fulfilled.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The recently announced government policy agenda commits economic diversification to and resilience, yet the government has not yet presented a timeline or implementation framework. Will the Honourable Premier outline the top 3 economic diversification priorities for 2026 and the timeline and funding allocations for each? The expected GDP growth outlook resulting from these initiatives, how progress is being measured and is or will be communicated publicly, and D, the planned role intended to engage the private sector in key industries such as tourism, construction, ICT, financial services, and the creative economy.
I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, I will provide a single response to this question. The policy agenda speaks to the upcoming budgetary years. The various plans and programs presented by the ministries and departments are still being assessed. The information requested will be provided during the upcoming budget presentation when plans have been fully finalized.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
We welcome your announcement of the Montserrat graduation from the ODA being suspended for now. However, Montserrat remains heavily dependent on external funding at a time when UK ODA budgets are under pressure. Sustainable economic planning requires transparency about fiscal risk and contingency strategy. Will the Honourable Premier state whether a fiscal risk assessment has been completed for the period 2026-2029, and if so, will the government share this assessment with the opposition? B, the government strategy for reducing dependency on recurrent budget support from the UK, and C, what percentage of the recurrent budget is projected to be locally generated revenue by 2028?
I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, again, the Honourable Member is being very premature as his nature. He has to await the announcement of those plans in the 2026-27 budget presentation. Madam Speaker, the fiscal register is compiled each fiscal year by the Ministry of Finance. It outlines the various risks to government and is not yet fully compiled for the upcoming fiscal years. It would be imprudent to share it with the opposition as it contains information that may prejudice the government in legal, financial matters if distributed at this time. Madam Speaker, I have outlined that this administration's plans during the 2025 budget presentation for the fiscal year 2025-26. Plans to reduce government dependence on budgetary aid will be outlined in more detail in the budget presentation of 2026-27, and this will include the local budget expectations for 2027 to 2028.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Supplementary, Madam Speaker, if permitted. Can the Honourable Premier give a timeline, explain for how long is the graduation from ODA for Montserrat been suspended for?
I recognize the Honourable Premier.
The ODA has been on pause. It has not been suspended, it's on pause. And this is a discussion which is held with the OECD, and they have not given a timeline.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Will the Honourable Premier outline what opportunities for increased trade, investment and economic cooperation were identified at the JMC and how the government intends to position Montserrat to benefit from the UK OT £17 million trade relationship and Commonwealth economic platforms?
I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, we're working on the development of our trade and investment initiatives. We are now aware of some of the support which can be offered by various trade and finance institutions in the UK. Going forward, we will be working with them in a more formal way of taking advantage of the opportunities which they have to offer.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Will the Honourable Premier inform this Honourable House what new commitments or programme support were secured for Montserrat under the UK Overseas Territories Biodiversity Strategy, including opportunities under the Darwin Plus and Blue Belt programme?
I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, these programs will require applications for any possible benefits under these schemes. Any other commitments will be rolled out in the 2026-2027 budget presentation.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, this brings me to the end of the questions to the Honourable Premier. I do have questions for the Honourable Minister of Buildings, Utilities, Infrastructure and Transportation. First question. Montserrat development and economic competitiveness depends on reliable, modern infrastructure. The public needs to know the government's priority plan and delivery schedule for infrastructure works across Montserrat. Can the Honourable Minister state, A, the government's 2026 National Infrastructure Priority List, including road networks, bridges, public buildings, and utility projects; B, the budget allocation and funding source for each priority project; C, the delivery timelines and process tracking mechanisms in place; and D, whether the ministry will publish a quarterly public update to support transparency and accountability.
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Build.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the priorities Thank you. The priorities are firmly anchored in the Infrastructure Priority Agenda 2023 to March 2026 and the Public Works Department Annual Maintenance Program, which encompasses routine, preventative, and corrective works. Under this framework, Madam Speaker, major corrective interventions that have already been completed at Braze Primary Schools, Blocks A and B, the Court and Registry Building, Salem Police Station, St. John's Health Center, Salem Clinic, St. John's Dental Unit, and the Braids Fire Station. There's additional corrective works which are packaged and scheduled for completion by March 2026 to be undertaken at the Airport Fire Station. Within the annual maintenance budget, significant improvements have also been delivered through the island-wide road patching program, including works at Little Bay, Jones Hill, sections of Lookout to Judy, Peace, Hope, Glebe, Alveston Woodlands, and Upper Frith communities, as well as maintenance along the A1 road corridor. Further program works to be completed by March 2026 include critical sections along the A1 corridor and B roads, Amos Gut, St. Peter's One-Way Road, Alveston B2 roads, and Woodlands, addressing both road and drainage deficiencies. The accelerating impacts, Madam Speaker, of climate change on the Casby area have also necessitated decisive actions, with plans advancing to construct an all-weather road and drainage system linking the Little Bay network to the Davy Hill community. By March 2026, approximately 75% of this essential section of the network will be completed, covering the most critical areas, with the remaining 25% positioned for funding consideration in the upcoming financial year. Design works are also being advanced for upgrading of river crossings, including the crossing at St. Peter's One-Way Road, alongside upstream maintenance and stabilization of our guts. In similar fashion, works are advancing to treat with corrective maintenance on our emergency facilities and other public buildings, including our child safeguarding facility at Kojohead, that is the old police station, and Salem Police Station compounds. The Ministry of Build has oversight as well of these projects. However, the funds remain with the Ministry of Health and Social Services. Utility improvements, including water supply upgrades and wastewater works associated with Drummonds and Davy Hill. We have completed the rehabilitation works at Fogarty Springs and continue to progress work at Hope Springs. The reservoirs to upgrade Montserrat water storage capacity have arrived on island, and Palm Loop network rehabilitation is in progress and near completion. We will then proceed to work at Lookout shortly. In addition, the rotating biological contactors, which we normally call RBCs, have been ordered and are due to arrive on island shortly and will be utilized in the advancement of the Margarita sewage works. With respect to energy transition activities, including the geothermal wellhead program, finalization of the flow testing reporting, and work supported under the Green Energy Transition Program. In late October, the flowing of the geothermal wells commenced. Geothermal fluid was collected and tested by partners from the University of Oxford and consultants from JRG Energy, alongside the Montserrat Energy Department, conducted additional testing to assess the reservoir's capacity, flow rate, and long-term sustainability. The final report by JRG Energy should be available in January 2026. This initiative is phase 1 of the Montserrat Green Energy Transition Program. The Renewable Energy Department has sight of that. In addition, aviation works relating to access control tower readiness and routine aerodrome maintenance. The elevator engineers will be back on island this week to install the motherboard that controls the operation of the elevator. Internal works, tiling, painting, and sealing works are completed. There is a continued restructuring and controlled remobilization of the port development project. These continue to be closely monitored and documented, and there's accountability for money spent using the joint account mechanism. The designated accounting officer is provided with reports on expenditure. B, the budget allocation and funding sources for such priority project. Madam Speaker, it is noted that this question was asked previously but I am happy to provide an answer. Just to reiterate, funding for 2025-2026 includes the $3.688 million for roads and buildings under the current maintenance program, allocations under the priority utilities program for water infrastructure and related works, up to $5.9 million under the GET program. This includes transmission, distribution, resilience work, associated equipment, digger, derrick, and the bucket trucks. Works are already underway for wastewater improvements in Margarita Bay. Port redevelopment funding remains with the UKSIF envelope, subject to the finalization of revised contractual arrangements if need be. The funding source, broken down as I said before, £33.383 from the UKSIF and Government of Montserrat, $7,579,000. Further allocation for 2026 will be confirmed through the budget annual process. The delivery timelines and progress tracking mechanisms in place. Timelines depend on procurement readiness, contractor availability, equipment condition, and weather. Delivery is managed through quarterly schedules under the Public Works Maintenance Program, the Project Steering Committee for major capital projects, namely the Utilities Working Group, the Strategic Board, and this is attended by ministers and the government, along with the FS, Steering Committee, and then to Cabinet. The port project is due for completion in September 2026, in addition to the Cultural Center project, which is timetabled for completion at the end of March 2026. The Infrastructure Priority Agenda provides annual and medium-term milestones. Regulatory or funded linked timelines for specific utility and energy transition components, namely the spring rehabilitation, speaking of Fogarty and Hope Springs, the distribution network rehabilitation water and reservoir project, wastewater facility project, transmission and distribution, electricity project, renewable energy development, all of which must be completed by the end of March 2026. These mechanisms guide sequencing and adjustments as conditions evolve. Whether the ministry will publish a quarterly update to support transparency and accountability. The ministry already provides structured updates to ministerial statements, internal reporting, radio announcement when necessary, and project-specific communication. As part of strengthening of public engagement and the flow of information on public infrastructure works, the ministry is in the process of recruiting an outreach coordinator whose role will support our communication with the public on the work of the ministry.
I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Minister, for your comprehensive answer. Actually, one supplementary permitted, Madam Speaker?
Yes?
Honourable Minister, I know we have touched base outside the Parliament on the update on the plans for refurbishment of the Kojet police station. Since we did have that discussion, do you have any further update, or do you wish for the benefit of the public to provide an update on that project?
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Build.
Thank you, Honourable Lewis. Regrettably, I don't have that. The officer responsible for that traveled throughout the week, which we discussed. That is the Social Services Director. So I will follow up on the advancement of that project, as we are both eager to undertake that for two reasons: the safeguarding unit, and secondly, the police station, as we normally refer to it, is being used by the community, and we really want to strengthen our community with the activities taken on there, the meetings that is held by the Kojohead, I would call it action group, and further lessons that are conducted there, or classes by members. So I thank you for your support, and I welcome the fact that you came to the ministry and we held that discussion. Thank you.
I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Can I move into question 2? After years of delays and shifting timelines, public confidence depends on blunt clarity, not hope, because hope is not a strategy. Will the Honourable Minister once and for all state unequivocally the date when visible physical construction will restart on the port and the date when the public can expect operational cargo and ferry service through the new facility, and confirm whether all financing and contracts are fully executed with no outstanding prevailing conditions?
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Build.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Visible activity on the port project has resumed. A spudge barge arrived in Montserrat on 3rd December and has been used to support the initial marine works for the Ro-Ro ramp, subject to weather and sea conditions. The contractor has indicated that the first sequence of permanent caissons is planned for placement before the Christmas break. These works follow the execution of the deed of variation and associated documents that authorize the controlled restart of the project. Current on-site activities include terrain preparation, mobilization for caisson positioning, inspection of caissons at Piper's Pond, and ongoing slug testing as reflected in the latest project status update. Recruitment of additional personnel and clearance of certain repair materials are still in progress, and weather continues to influence the sequencing of marine operations. The financing envelope remains available, and the contractual arrangements required for mobilization have been executed. The contractors program identifies 17th of September 2026 as the contractual completion date. However, it would be premature to state an operational date for cargo and ferry service until further progress has been made on the critical marine and landside elements of the facility and the program has been further assessed. The Ministry will continue to provide updates as phase works advance and as validated progress milestones become available. In closing, I will end with the question: it is hope which served to provide the foundation over the dark days of volcanic eruption. Hope may not be a strategy pillar of our, but hope may not be a strategy, but it is a pillar of our Christian faith. It is that which kept us during the dire political regimes that left this country lost at sea. Indeed, I have reiterated my frustration and immense disappointment with our incomplete port. It is the hope in Jehovah that gives the courage to say that this too shall pass, and some of us grieve, but not without hope. The powerful statement made by the Bible, hope will not put us to shame, is what I stand by, Romans 5:5. I commend 1 Corinthians 13:13, now abideth faith, hope, and love. Love admonishes that I rest at this point.
I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
And Madam Speaker, to the Honourable Minister, I say amen. Madam Speaker, I realize that the Minister have a heavy load to carry, a burden.
Excuse me? I didn't hear you. I didn't hear you.
I said I realize the Minister have a heavy burden to carry, a load she inherited, and therefore I will not ask her any more than 2 questions. I'll now move on to another minister. Questions to the Honourable Minister of Agriculture, Lands, Housing, Environment, Sports and Youth Affairs. Question 1. The access road to Upper Blake's farm suffered significant erosion following heavy rains several months ago, leaving farmers without vehicular access. Can the Minister indicate whether the Ministry intends to construct a properly surfaced access road to Upper Blake's farm within this financial year?
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm going to guess that because I'm from St. Peter's, like the honourable member, he thinks I can carry a heavier load because he asked me 6 questions. Madam Speaker, farmers in the Upper Blakes area lease their farmlands from private landowners. Madam Speaker, as the roadway in question is situated on private property, the government is not authorised to pave it. Although it's the landowner's responsibility to provide suitable access for leases, the government has nonetheless undertaken periodic repairs to facilitate continued access for the farmers. Madam Speaker, I am pleased to indicate that funds have been secured under the Agricultural Development Programme to once again carry out temporary repairs to this road. These works will proceed as soon as the necessary equipment become available, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, Madam Speaker, supplementary to the Minister. Minister,
Yes.
you mentioned that you're not in a position, or government not in a position to construct a properly paved road because it's on private lands. Have the government approached any of those owners for possibly sale of the land?
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Not for the sale of the land, Madam Speaker, but what needs to happen going forward is I think we need to have an agreement with the said owner because we have to protect our farmers' interests. I think we would know that if we pave the land, that it may bring some value, which we're not opposed to, but we have to protect the farmers' interests as well, in that he will keep the farmers on that said land, Madam Speaker. So going forward, we will seek to have certain negotiations with the farmer, with the landholder, so that we can know what his plans or future plans are for the land. That way we can allocate the proper resources to it, whether he wants to do a housing initiative or he wants to keep it as a farming initiative. But either way, Madam Speaker, we are happy to help him with either initiative.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Given the importance of reliable irrigation to our island's food security, can the Minister provide an update on the construction of the new water pump house in the Upper Blakes area? Specifically, what is the current status of the project and when is it expected to become fully operational to supply water to all farmers in the area?
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the pumps have already been purchased and are currently in use at the Upper Blakes facility. Well, the pipes have also been acquired, Madam Speaker, and the earthworks have been completed, and the necessary piping installation has been done and buried. The most recent setback, however, Madam Speaker, encountered was the accumulation of heavy silt and debris in the dam at the point where the pump intake is located. Access to the edge of the dam has since been created using an excavator, and preliminary clearing of the dam will commence in the near future, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the pump house in question is not considered a major project, and it is simply a small shed intended just to cover the pump while it's in operation, and our Department of Agriculture will schedule its construction in due course once the requisite resourcing has been allocated, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Supplementary. Honourable Minister, you said the problem is silt in the dam build-up. Once you clear it, does that mean that, referring to my question, in terms of all farmers would have water? The reason why I'm going down that line, I'm told that some have, but some do not have. So if you can provide the clarity.
Recognize the Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So yes, Madam Speaker, the silt is one problem which comes from water that's being washed down off the road. So we are clearing the drains, which we do periodically. The other point to which the Honourable Member would have mentioned, what we have been doing is pumping the water uphill into the containments, and then they can gravity feed down for all the farmers. So if there's farmers that don't have access to the water, they can simply just make an application and we can sort that out for them.
I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Food prices continue to rise, and Montserrat remains heavily dependent on imports. Strengthening local production is essential to food security and cost of living relief. As such, will the Honourable Minister tell this Honourable House a total annual food production levels he inherited for 2023 and 2024 by crop and livestock category, B, production levels in 2025, and the Ministry's targets for increasing local population, local production in 2026. C, resources allocated to support farmers, including irrigation, financing, agricultural extension services, and equipment access. And D, measurable indicators being used to evaluate progress toward reducing food import dependency.
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, question part A and B are presented as tables. I don't think it's prudent for me to go through the whole table in Parliament, and they were provided as appendixes. Madam Speaker, just to answer the rest of the question, in terms of capital funding, the Agricultural Development Programme budgets for the 2025-26 financial year stand at $1 million, and also $1 million has been designated for the Agricultural Loans Programme. On the recurrent side, Madam Speaker, the Department of Agriculture has allocated $323,600 to support farmers, so that would add to the other two amounts that I just mentioned, Madam Speaker. The Department of Agriculture continues to provide a wide range of assistance and subsidies to farmers, fishers, and agro-processors. These include irrigation hoses and fittings, water tanks, tractoring services, extension support, land clearing assistance, fence wire, fish pot wire, fish aggregating devices known as FADs, equipment purchasing assistance, pen construction support, and water subsidy assistance for farmers connected to the MUL network, among other forms of support, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Department of Agriculture has also been actively engaged in CARICOM's mandate to increase regional agricultural production by 25%. To this end, we have identified specific crops, analyzed the relevant production data, and established targeted production goals to contribute meaningfully to this regional and national objective. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Young entrepreneurs continue to seek opportunities in farming, agri-processing, and value-added industries, but limited access to land, capital, and technical support restricts growth. Can the Honourable Minister outline the number of youth farmers or agricultural enterprises supported in 2024-25 and the type of assistance provided? B, availability and allocation criteria for agricultural land to youth and new entrants. C, partnership being pursued with schools, NGOs, and the private sector to expand youth involvement in agriculture. And D, whether the ministry will establish a youth agricultural grant or accelerate program to stimulate agribusiness development in 2026.
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are several initiatives geared towards youth in agriculture or agricultural enterprises. The Department of Agriculture continues to advance implementation of these initiatives as follows. Under the Agriculture Development Programme, funds have been allocated for the rehabilitation of the Montserrat Secondary School's 2 greenhouses, assistance with land clearing, and support for poultry pen construction. Additionally, Madam Speaker, through the CARICOM Women and Youth in Agricultural project, the island will benefit from 4 new greenhouses and a 20-foot solar-powered refrigeration container for produce storage. The refrigeration container, Madam Speaker, is already on island. And this would further strengthen the agricultural sector and creating opportunities for new entrants, in particular, Madam Speaker, women and youth. As part of our ongoing efforts, the ministry recently conducted a farmers' needs survey which captured demographic information such as age. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, the results again highlighted the extreme low number of young people, 1%, Madam Speaker, of the respondents expressing interest in farming, fishing, or agro-processing. Again, Madam Speaker, despite hosting several town hall-style meetings publicized on social media and ZJB and intended to gather feedback from farmers and interested persons, the ministry continues to observe very limited youth participation. Madam Speaker, also on one of my trips this year, I would have met with the president of the nonprofit group 4H, and who also created and is implementing a youth in agriculture curriculum across the OECS and CARICOM member states. Madam Speaker, the president has vowed to work with the ministry to also aid Montserrat in this manner, and some resources may then become available to help with the initiative of generating more youth interest in agriculture. Furthermore, all support offered by the Department of Agriculture can be accessed through the completion of the Agricultural Assessment Request Form located at the head office, Madam Speaker. All applicants, including the young entrepreneurs mentioned by the Honourable Member, are encouraged to complete the required forms for assistance. Moreover, Madam Speaker, the Department of Agriculture remains committed to its long-standing mission to recruit, support, and encourage new and young farmers and producers, and continues to welcome all who are interested in pursuing opportunities within the agricultural sector. Madam Speaker, thank you.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
With job opportunities or limited job opportunities and rising cost of living, many young Montserratians are facing discouragement and are seeking opportunities overseas. A clear youth development plan is urgently needed. Will the Honourable Minister state the current percentage of youth unemployment in Montserrat and how it compares to the last 3 years, B, the number and type of skills development, apprenticeship, or graduate placement programs available for youth in 2025-2026. C, partnership being developed with the private sector to expand employment and training pathways. And D, whether the ministry will complete and implement the National Youth Policy with measurable outcomes and timelines within the next 6 months.
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me just first apologize because although we presented some data, this was the data that we got from statistics in question A. So it doesn't specifically answer the last 3 years as we got 2018, 2020, and 2023 from the Statistics Department. Madam Speaker, to answer the rest of the question, including Part B, the number type of skills development, for 2025, the apprenticeship placement programs are for those who want to study mechanics, agriculture, teaching, sports, legal, even library studies, those who want to be involved in MCRS, the hospital, the fire and rescue service, and police. That was the 2025 skills development, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, going forward into 2026, the apprenticeship programs will be accredited programs, some of which will be accredited through UE, Penn Foster, and NVQ, and these will include carpentry, electrician, masonry, plumbing, general handyman work, mechanical work, work in agriculture, small engine repair, port operations, entrepreneurship, and ICT, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the ministry also continues to strengthen partnerships with the private sector to expand employment and training pathways for our young people. These efforts include engaging businesses to raise awareness of the apprenticeship program, that's a TAP program previously mentioned, and encouraging them to more readily accommodate interns. We are also working closely with the schools to gather information on students' career interests, enabling us to better position programs and opportunities that align with their aspirations. In addition, Madam Speaker, we are collaborating with community groups to identify meaningful ways in which our community centers can be utilized to support youth development, both personally and professionally. Through these partnerships, we aim to create a more responsive, supportive, and opportunity-rich environment for our country's youth. Madam Speaker, the ministry has been assiduously pursuing major policies, initiatives under the purview of the Department of Community, Youth and Sports. Foremost among these is the Montserrat Sports and Recreation Policy, which is now at an advanced stage of development. Following its completion, the National Youth Policy and other key departmental policies for the department will be progressed in accordance with agreed priorities and available resources. And if I may just put in here, Madam Speaker, I am amenable to the opposition members stating what they think is also a priority for them. Thank you.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question 6. This is my last question to the Minister. Sports are central to national pride, youth development, and health, yet many sporting facilities around the island remain under-resourced or incomplete. Will the Honourable Minister provide a status update and expected completion timelines for ongoing and planned upgrades to national sporting facilities, government football field, MSS field and hard courts, cricket facilities, basketball courts, and our valued multipurpose indoor sports facility? B, the annual budget allocation for sports infrastructure and athlete development for the financial year 2024-2025 and 2025-2026. C, Ministry's strategy for supporting high-performance athletes in national representation abroad. And D, the criteria used to determine priority sports sector investments.
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this government has inherited several facilities that require extensive repairs. Whilst this government does not own all facilities in the territory, we seek to bring the existing ones to a higher standard. To do so, Madam Speaker, requires writing projects, seeking funding and sponsorships, and it will take time to secure resources and carry out those repairs. We are in the preparation stage and not in a position to outline timelines, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the breakdown of the budget allocation for sports infrastructure and athlete development for 2025-2026 is as follows. Maintenance, $75,000. Total subvention to 5 sports associations, $185,000. And more specifically, Madam Speaker, $25,000 to the Montserrat Amateur Athletic Association. Madam Speaker, it is recognized that the current overall budget allocated to the Department of Community, Youth Affairs and Sports is insufficient to effectively meet the growing needs of the sporting sector. Consequently, a request for a significant increase in funding has been submitted for consideration in the upcoming financial year commencing in April 2026. Madam Speaker, this government administration acknowledges and supports representation abroad in an aim to assist and develop our athletes. The sports policy is currently being reviewed, also by current members of this Honourable House. Implementing the sports policy is part of the strategy to assist high-performance athletes. Aspects of the policy, Madam Speaker, speak to time off from work for training and competition, improvements to the said facilities, and also compensation, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would emphasize that the government is also open to inputs from the Honourable Opposition, which I am hoping they will do so through the sports policy. Madam Speaker, priority investments in the sports sector can be guided by several key criteria. These include the availability of facilities and qualified personnel, such as athletes, coaches, and officials. Additional factors include performance levels, popularity of the sport, income generation, and youth involvement, to include career potential, Madam Speaker. Furthermore, the prioritization of any sport will also take into account the existence of a recognized and functioning governing body and its affiliation with regional and international sporting organizations, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I assure the Honourable Minister that the opposition have been consulted on the youth policy and have made some critical interventions to improve the policy. And I want to also assure the Honourable Minister that the significant increase he asked for, that if he doesn't get it from the Minister of Finance, I'll deal with him. Madam Speaker, this ends the, my questioning segment.
Thank you. I recognize the Honourable Romeo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My first question is to the Honourable Minister for Build. The Honourable Minister for Build informed this Honourable House. I want to ask A and B first, then C and D. On what date nighttime medevac services were discontinued and the specific reasons provided for the suspension of nighttime medevac operations?
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Build. You would put your mic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Nighttime medevac services ceased in November 2019 following regulatory advice from ASI that operations could not continue under the governor's instructions, which permit flights only during daylight hours and in visual meteorological conditions. B?
You did B. And C, Madam Speaker.
So she didn't answer B as yet.
B, the specific reason provided for the suspension of nighttime medevac operations. Nighttime medevacs were suspended because the governor's instructions did not permit night operations, and the aviation regulator, ASI, advised that the BN2 Islander did not have the performance margins required for safe night departures. Approval for night operations would have required an acceptable safety case addressing aircraft performance, obstacle clearance, lighting, and emergency procedures, which was not available at that time.
Recognize the Honourable Romeo.
And C, what infrastructural, operational, and financial requirements must be met to instate nighttime medevac capability together with the estimated cost? And what has she or the government done since the last sitting to secure such reinstatement?
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Build.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Reinstatement of nighttime medevac capability requires the following: revised governor's instructions authorizing night operations, the regulator ASI accepting safety risk assessments and operational procedures, upgraded runway threshold precision approach path indicator, also known as PAPI or PAPI, and wing bar lighting, replacement of constant current regulator CCRS, which is an equipment which controls the airfield lighting and has been identified as a critical requirement. New air traffic control lighting panel. The air traffic tower project proceeded with the intention of transitioning the present lighting panel from the current air traffic tower to the new air traffic tower. However, it was not highlighted as being critical for replacement at the time and has been in use since the inception of the construction of the new tower. A recent audit by ASI has now identified this as a requirement for transitioning into the new tower. We also require appropriate obstacle lighting in accordance with survey data, power backup reliability for lighting, air traffic control, and communication systems, night-capable rescue firefighting services, readiness, including training for operations in darkness. Further, updated air traffic control rosters that allow for on-call night medevacs. Updates to the Aerodrome Manual, Rescue Fighting Services Manual, Air Traffic Control Manual of Air Traffic Services, ATC MATS, and associated documentation. Appropriate notice to Airmen Aeronautical Information Publication as well is required. Final and the necessary amendments once operational hours have changed. Work is ongoing to scope the technical requirements for reinstating night operations. Final costing will depend on confirmation of the specifications required by the regulator. The next question, what has happened since the last sitting? The ministry has continued coordination with the Office of the Premier, the Governor's Office, the airport manager, and the regulator regarding the technical and regulatory requirements for nighttime vision flight rules and medevac operations. A small working group was convened, and ASI provided a detailed list of requirements for medevac operations to that group. Replacement apron floodlights and accessories have arrived and are being prepared for installation. The Manchester Airports Group, MAG, has been preparing guidance on the steps needed to progress towards regulatory authorization for night operations. Suppliers have been contacted to obtain quotations for a new lighting panel. Infrastructure systems, including lighting and generator capacity, continue to be reviewed. Limited extensions beyond sunset continue under the provisions already permitted.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
A supplementary, please, Madam Speaker. I think in her answer, she mentioned the lack of or performance capability of the Islander at night. And I advise that it refers to its power to deal with obstacles in takeoff if it loses an engine. My question then, Honorable Minister, perhaps you can find out for us, if you don't know the answer, whether a Twin Otter would do better than the Islander, and why haven't we considered the Twin Otter? And secondly, if the Islander lacks the performance at night, carrying one patient, a doctor and a nurse, I don't know how many others, without luggage like in the daytime, and 6 or 7 passengers, how is it that the Islander is considered safe in the day and not in the night? I'm not so sure if you can answer that, but I'd like to get an answer, if you can, for that, hopefully soon, either for this assembly or directly to me. And, Honourable Minister, it's been 5 years since we haven't had night medevac, and that, as you would assume, will create a situation where lives may have been lost already. Is there a time frame to get this done? And
your supplementary is extended.
There's 4 sections she answered, and I'm responding to the sections. Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's not just one question. So, would you please assist me with answering those questions?
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Build.
With the question as to whether a Twin Otter could do better than a Islander, that is a matter I will take back to the technical staff. I will not wish to speak on that at this time. We've had many discussions with regard to the capacity of both. With respect to the Islander taking off at night, as we would have seen, there were a number of factors that we are currently looking at as to what needs to happen for that, whether it's the Islander or Twin Otter who would carry out the medevac services. We have not restricted it, as far as I'm aware, to any one airplane at this time. So for the 5-year period we've been waiting, it's been too long I agree with you, sir. The health and well-being of our people is very important. It also strengthens our economic reputation. When persons come here, they want to know that they were able to leave if needs be. But I want to say as well, and this is not hope, if I may say, Honorable Lewis, that with the work that we see taking place at the hospital, the new hospital complex, we may not even need medivacs in due course, and that is one of the things I would want to see happen. But, sir, I thank you for your questions, and I will seek to get further elucidation from my technical team in respect of the questions that you have asked, particularly when it comes to comparing airlines. It would be irresponsible of me to do that in this honorable House at this time. Thank you so much.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And if I may, you might want to add twin-engine helicopters, not just twin otters. My second question. As the Minister with responsibility for power generation and distribution, could the Honourable Minister inform this Honourable House, A, what projected timeline, work plan and resource requirements have been established to permanently address the recurring power outages attributable to the aging mal-distribution infrastructure, and B, what mechanisms the government intends to put in place to compensate or otherwise relieve households and businesses that continue to sustain losses to equipment as a result of the ongoing outages.
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Build.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will answer Part A at this time. The recurring outages are primarily linked to the age and condition of the distribution network. MUL has been progressing a phased program of electrical hardware replacement, switchgear upgrades, and improvements to feeders and substations. These activities form part of its wider reliability plan. We envision the introduction of renewables into the grid. In addition, the Green Energy Transition GET program includes targeted support for the strengthening of the transmission and distribution system, focusing on areas with high fault frequency and providing equipment to improve the efficiency and safety of line work. Resource requirements will be finalized once MUL completes its updated engineering assessments. Delivery timelines will depend on material lead times, contract availability, the outcome of the tariff review, which is needed to support longer-term investment planning. The phase program is being advanced more expeditiously thanks to the United Kingdom's government Green Energy Transition GET program that gave us £5.9 million that is enabling the timely procurement of materials required for the undergrounding of transmission and distribution line, to include ducts, cables, transformers, and to execute the related civil works, starting at the urgent priority areas of Lookout and Gerrards. This continued work augurs well to help us address the challenges. What mechanisms the government intend to put in place to compensate or otherwise relieve households and businesses that continue to sustain losses to equipment as a result of ongoing outages? Madam Speaker, the government does not have a formal mechanism in place for compensating equipment losses, which is said to be the fault of the utility. And I may just add that when we speak of the government, in this case, we're talking about MUL. I encourage us all as households and businesses to adequately protect our equipment connected to the wiring of our property. I am advised that electricity instability within the establishment can be due to many causes, some of which include lighting, short circuits, irregularities with transformers, inappropriately rated or substandard transformers, faulty and or improper wiring, inappropriate or incompatible equipment, substandard equipment, rodent wire biting activity, water infiltration, rust, and many other causes. The utility intends to help customers by issuing further tips and guidelines for protecting equipment, in addition to recommending specialized household protection hardware. The focus remains on improving overall network reliability through planned upgrades and operational improvements. I am further advised that it is a common practice across the utility sector that electricity providers generally do not accept liability for damage to private equipment unless it is proven there was willful negligence or malpractice on the part of the utility. Consumers are encouraged to take all reasonable precautions to protect all of their devices and appliances, including the use of appropriately rated surge protection and voltage conditioning equipment. I am advised that the consumer is responsible for what transpires after the electricity meter. The utility focuses on providing the appropriate, consistent, stable voltage and frequency of electricity. Where consumers make inquiries about potential equipment damage, MOL requires supporting documentation from a licensed electrician confirming that the equipment fault originated on the utility side. Such cases are assessed on their individual merits within MOL's established governance arrangements, and the requirement for certified reports ensures that decisions are based on a verifiable technical evidence. Future considerations relating to service standards and consumer protection will be informed by the outcome of the tariff review and the broader regulatory work which is underway. This exercise will help determine how such matters can be addressed in a structured manner. The government and MOL appreciate that there are challenges which are experienced, and policies and mechanisms are being explored and implemented to address and minimize the challenges. A draft MOL electrical equipment damage claim policy has been put before the MUL board for a decision. A proposal to introduce a modern advanced metering infrastructure, AMI, was also put before the board. These meters will help with accurately analyzing the electricity going to the establishment. The MAI systems will also allow utilities to monitor voltage levels and power quality across the grid in real time. This data helps utilities identify and troubleshoot system-wide voltage problems and imbalances, which can help prevent some surge-related issues on a macro level. MUL is seeking permission from the board to undertake these advancements.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
A supplemental, please. My question asks what the government intends to do, not MOL. And while I appreciate all the answers or suggestions given, my simple question then would be, why not extend the duty-free concession on white goods, which the PDM government did and the MCAP government did, to relieve households? And Madam Speaker, I just want to emphasize to the Minister in answering the question that there are sick people who do not have refrigerators and are afraid to buy one because they may have it lost. Again, they lost it to power outages. I know of civil servants who are using an ice box after losing their refrigerator, televisions, and others. Can we do something quickly to address duty-free concessions on white goods?
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Build.
Thank you very much for that question or that suggestion. I will inform the Honorable Minister, the Honorable Member, that we have already discussed this, and the Minister of Finance, who is responsible for determining how this would be done, because it would involve reducing duty, etc. So I am not one for counting my chickens before they hatch. But the paper is being constructed, I believe, even before we spoke at this time. Honorable Romeo, I feel the pain that the majority of us in Montserrat have been experiencing, but especially for those who are less fortunate and cannot afford purchasing an appliance, because they're different appliances. As we move from house to house, and I'm not using my own home to compare, I am one who likes seasonal fruits, so I like to store. So I made an impressive investment in a refrigerator, and it's out there like an exhibition piece. And as you move through our homes, you see that. And so, Madam Speaker, I take what Honorable Romeo has said, and we will seek to advance perhaps a policy that can assist persons who need help, and that will be conducted most likely at the Social Services Department. So that is something we can advance. As we have been, it's the Christmas season, and we've been welcoming the opposition to partner with us so we can sit and we can discuss that and we can advance it. And I know our health minister, who is responsible for social services, would be only too happy to join this committee and see what we can do to advance some help for those who cannot afford it, especially the elderly. Thank you so much.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll send the gentleman to the Minister for Social Services. Could the Honourable Minister indicate to this Honourable House what actions are being taken to ensure that critical airport and airline equipment and related infrastructure are not subjected to risk or degradation during nighttime hours due to the absence of night security, and what steps are being undertaken to safeguard passenger safety and maintain reliable airport operations?
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Build.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Night security is no longer part of the airport security staffing. From 2023 onward, the approved 18-post complement did not include a night security function. Nighttime coverage is therefore provided through Royal Montserrat Police Service patrols, CCTV monitoring, and restricted access procedures. Aviation security responsibilities fall under the Governor. The Ministry has raised the matter with the Governor. Interim protections include strengthened access control procedures. We have a biometric system, and that's a biometric door, and ongoing coordination between the airport manager, the chief security officer, and the relevant authorities. And in particular, that would be the police. It should also be noted that the Overseas Territories Aviation Requirements, OTA 178, aircraft operators remain responsible for securing their aircraft at all times. Security arrangements remain under continuous review and are informed by intelligence and risk assessments.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
A supplemental, please, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Minister just said that OTA basically says that the aircraft operators are responsible for security arrangements. Is that correct?
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Build.
Before
Honorable
I ask my
Romeo.
supplemental, I need to be sure.
Madam Speaker.
He did not finish asking the supplementary, so give him a chance if,
So in answering, she needs to tell me what I'm saying is correct. Is she saying that OTA is saying that the operators are responsible for the securing the aircraft. With a fence, no key to enter the grounds, how does an aircraft owner secure their airplane? And if I remember, in this very building, the aircraft operators expressed concern about having their aircraft at the airport without security at night, which could lead to safety issues for passengers and damage to their planes.
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Built.
Madam Speaker, a supplementary is for clarity. And I've been advised by my technicians, and we can perhaps provide the requisite paper, the OTA 178, which states, again, aircraft operators remain responsible for securing their aircraft at all times. Security arrangements remain under continuous review and are informed by intelligence and risk assessments. I can follow up on this question and see what information can be provided to answer the honourable member's question whether this statement is correct or not.
I recognize the Honourable Romeo.
My next question to the Minister. Could the Honourable Minister for Built briefly inform this Honourable House of the principal challenges currently facing road maintenance and reconstruction, and could she outline the key outcomes she aims to achieve over the next 2 to 5 years, together with the strategies and measures she intends to employ in order to release those ambitions, to realize those ambitions? Let me read it again. Could the Honourable Minister of Built briefly inform this Honourable House of the principal challenges currently facing road maintenance and reconstruction? And could she outline the key outcomes she aims to achieve over the next 2 to 5 years, together with strategies and measures she intends to employ in order to realize those ambitions?
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Built.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I do not wish to fall foul of you, or I would have said I remain committed to building a premium destination for people to live, work, study, and have fun or enjoyment. And that also, Madam Speaker, requires that we have sound infrastructure. The principal challenges, Madam Speaker, in road maintenance and reconstruction relate to the age and condition of the network, drainage limitation, steep terrain, and the impact of increasingly intense rainfall events, which accelerate surface failure and undermine retaining structures. Most of our road network is more than 50 years old. We come out of what they call the stone pounding era, when those roads were built, and these have deteriorated significantly. The system is heavily stressed with the amount of vehicular traffic which were not expected for these areas, and in many areas has gone beyond repair, requiring critical interventions. The drainage infrastructure is also in urgent need of attention, with climate change impacts accelerating its decline. Ultimately, adequate funding remains a key challenge, while a major capital initiative is not immediately available. Incremental improvements are being pursued under available maintenance funding. And just to say, Madam Speaker, please do not reprimand me for that. We just received some additional money, $2 million in the last Parliament, to assist us. The program is also shaped by the availability of equipment, the asphalt plant's ability to operate at full capacity without breakdowns, and the requirement to phase works within the limits of the annual budget while prioritizing projects according to risk. Over the next 2 to 5 years, the intended outcomes include maintaining island-wide access, strengthening high-risk sections of the A1 road corridor, completing priority resurfacing in key communities, and probably I'll say all, because all of our roads have been hampered, Madam Speaker, by cracks, by potholes, and improving the gut and drainage infrastructure as well to reduce the effects of stormwater and slope instability. Strategies include phased resurfacing, targeted drainage upgrades and cleaning, continued patching and verge works, and the planned use of equipment received under the Essential Equipment Program. Works will continue to be scheduled in line with the quarterly maintenance plans and adjusted as needed in response to weather impacts and plant availability.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
A supplemental, please, Madam Speaker. Is the Honourable Minister suggesting that we're going to need significantly more funds to maintain, reconstruct, and to construct new roads in the next 2 to 5 years? Or will the funds we're getting right now be sufficient?
Recognize the Honorable Minister of Build.
Madam Speaker, the money we have received is not sufficient, and I would gladly welcome any funds that can come in to assist us.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My next question is to the Honourable Minister of Health. Minister of Health. Could the Honourable Minister of Health inform this Honourable House whether since the last sitting there has been any action taken or communication received from the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office at the FCDO regarding the provision of housing and welfare assistance for individuals, whether full British citizens or naturalized citizens, who do not qualify for the NHS 10 scheme but require short or long-term specialist care while receiving free medical treatment in the United Kingdom.
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can you ask Honourable Romeo to repeat the question, please? I've just opened my page.
Gladly. Could the Honourable Minister of Health inform this Honourable House whether since the last sitting there has been any action taken or communication received from the FCDO regarding the provision of housing and welfare assistance for individuals, whether full British citizens or naturalized citizens, who do not qualify for the NHS 10 scheme but require short or long-term specialist care while receiving free medical treatment in the United Kingdom.
Should I take it that you're withdrawing the first question? So you're asking number 2 before number 1? Oh, you never indicated. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank Honourable Romeo for the question. There's been no progress in this area, but I am happy to arrange further meetings and to include the opposition. But this is obviously a serious matter. To a non-national who has obtained a Montserrat passport, we must highlight that this passport makes you equal on Montserrat, but not in the UK. Some persons might migrate to the UK on the Montserrat passport with plans to apply for the British passport while in the UK. However, it is important to note that if circumstances change while waiting to apply for the UK passport, the UK government will not allow these persons to access public funds or free health care to support them. This means no access to social housing, for example. And it is also important to note that persons who are on social welfare on Montserrat, on leaving Montserrat for the UK, the payments on Montserrat will continue for 3 months only and then will stop. There is presently no referral process to social welfare in the UK from social welfare on Montserrat. I do feel, however, that this is something that can be worked on. On a more favorable side, on discussion with UK officials on a recent trip, I was made aware of the reality that for quota referrals to the UK,
non-nationals are not excluded. So non-nationals with a British Overseas Territories passport are not excluded. One simply needs to be a British Overseas Territories passport holder, such as having a Montserrat passport, and be a resident of Montserrat in order to qualify for a medical quota referral to the UK for care. I must also point out the existence of non-quota referrals, in which the Government of Montserrat can pay for persons to receive care in the UK. It is worth considering this for persons who are already in the non-fee-paying category, who the government is already responsible for. The care they receive in the UK would have to be paid for by the Government of Montserrat. I cannot be anti-British or anti-FCDO in my responses, although sometimes I do perceive Honourable Romeo as being thus. The British have spent well over £400 million on Montserrat over the last 30 years, and it is not often them who block us. Very often it is our own people who stand in our way. In the meantime, Madam Speaker, we must do all we can to make things better locally so that people who actually want to stay can. We cannot leave the island underdeveloped and unsupported and leave persons uninspired and then complain that they just want to leave after 8 years. After 8 years of watching no progress on an island, what is a non-national left to do but to try another dream? And if this dream involves migration to the UK, so be it. So I urge my colleagues to continue their efforts in their ministries to ensure that things are better for all of us on this island, including non-nationals, making it more likely that these persons will remain with us and grow our population. In health, I must point out that under much pressure in 2019, the Government of Montserrat did set up a critical care unit. In 2022, under the pressures of the COVID-19 pandemic, with exclusion of our patients from every intensive care unit in the region, because they were full of their own patients and had their own risks and priorities, Montserrat managed to further invest in critical care services on island. In 2023, after a 15-year ask, we received our first CT scanner, and this year we finally trained trainers in advanced cardiac life support. Much honor and respect to the doctors who shone in this regard in training in cardiac life support, as this is an area very, very close to my heart. So, Madam Speaker, to Honourable Romeo, things are not perfect at the moment, but I think it's obvious that it really has been a multi-government approach with various steps being made over time to allow us to deliver sustainable critical care and emergency care on island, and in other aspects of care we are improving. For example, our improved diagnostic capability with the introduction of a more full endoscopy service to assess for GI cancers, for example. So some things are changing, some things are getting better. It's perhaps the pace that I find extremely frustrating. What else can our government do to make things better on island in healthcare would be to finally create a fast and efficient medical evacuation service to ensure that we have implemented consultant-led emergency care with the appropriate specialist. And we can implement lasting policies that support our people. We could also set up dialysis for our patients in kidney failure who would surely die without it. Just a reminder about the need for dialysis on this island. 2 people die per year on Montserrat with a diagnosis of end-stage kidney disease on their death certificate. There's no record of the numbers who are forced to migrate. In 2023, the number of people who died of kidney failure here was 5. We are hoping to start a renal registry so we can keep track of persons abroad. Of the patients who attend the district clinics on Montserrat, 25% of them already have some form of end-stage kidney disease. Dialysis is also needed in critical care as many patients develop multi-organ failure, including the requirement for renal replacement, so dialysis there as well. And just to point out that of the 9 people elected in October of 2025, 3 of them have a parent forced to live in the UK because of the dialysis requirement. And of all of us, to include the opposition, 4 of us have relatives who are living in the UK because of the dialysis requirement. And of all of us sitting on this side, 50% of us have a parent living in the UK because of the dialysis requirement. In the Caribbean, we have inherited a gene from our West African descent, which significantly increases deterioration to end-stage kidney disease. I think that's actually the end of the response.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
A supplemental, please. For clarity, are you saying that if a person does not have someone in the UK to stay with and does not have the funds to provide for food and sustenance while getting medical care, that they can't qualify to be on the NHS 10 scheme? That's the first thing. I think the public need to be clear on that. Secondly, for most cases that are urgent...
Are you asking 2 supplementaries?
It is a supplemental, Madam Speaker.
But secondly?
It is giving her once. I think she can handle it.
Make your question, please.
If patients are taken to the region for short-term urgent care, but England provides medium to longer-term care for someone, and then they can return, what happens to somebody who cannot provide for themselves housing and subsistence in the UK if they need longer-term care? What happens to those persons?
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Health.
Just it points out, Madam Speaker, to Honourable Romeo, the great socioeconomic divide in healthcare. Those who have shall live, and those who have not may not live. It's an awkward question to answer because obviously if a person needs to travel to Barbados, for example, for medical intervention, they will approach the Social Services Department to ask for funds which will cover the cost of travel to Barbados, would have to cover accommodation in Barbados, and would have to cover the cost of care. However, if a person wants to travel to the UK, the government of Montserrat presently provides no funding for accommodation or maintenance while in the UK. So it's definitely something that is worth exploring, and perhaps the amount that you spend would be equal in both places. So, you know, it should be about quality of care and should not create a socioeconomic divide.
I recognize the Honourable Romeo.
Yes, Madam Speaker. My next question to the Honourable Minister. Could the Honourable Minister of Health explain to this Honourable House why citizens, residents and visitors are not charged the full cost of medical care when accessing casualty services locally, yet are required to assume financial responsibility for medical services through Medivac, overseas medical treatment, and associated hospital fees when referred abroad for urgent and life-saving specialist care unavailable on Montserrat?
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a very good question, so thank you, Honourable Romeo. And I'm supposing that the government of Montserrat does not cover the cost of medical evacuation and care abroad because it's so terribly expensive. But if the government of Montserrat cannot afford the cost of care for its citizens abroad, how can the people of Montserrat afford that care? This is even more relevant as it pertains to persons over the age of 60 and to children. The Public Health Act obligates me as minister, and without limiting the generality of, it expects me to ensure the prevention, treatment, limitation, and suppression of disease. So the Act makes me obligated to treat the disease, but but it does not specify where. It also does not specify that I am obligated to provide free overseas care. However, as a parliamentarian elected by the people to serve them, particularly in the area of health, I obviously have a moral obligation, and I must point out that with the present cost of medical evacuation and care overseas, anyone living on island and being paid the salaries on island would well and truly be bankrupt by the cost of medical evacuation. Fortunately, the Social Services Department allows patients to pay the total cost in installments over time. However, for certain bills for young persons who have received care that has saved their lives, this means that they will never be able to afford a mortgage or never be able to invest in their small business. To an older person, what does it really mean to wake up from a coma and to have to pay $200,000 for the cost of your care abroad? I mean, surely the thought is enough to send an older person who has survived a critical illness into heart failure. So I joined the people and the rest of government in attempting to find a solution to the cost of emergency care overseas. And certainly reducing the cost of the flight would be an improvement. So one aspect that has to be addressed is the cost of the flight. At present, by preferred priority in terms of provider with senior civil servants, patients are being expected to spend $25,000 US to travel 400 miles down the coast to receive acute care. And unfortunately, this very often means that the patient has to go to Antigua first. So very often for persons time-critical emergencies who need to receive care in a tertiary facility right now, their care is not only delayed, but is sometimes 5 or more times as expensive. Getting a patient to Guadeloupe now, which might cost $4,000 US, to me is the obvious solution to both ensuring patients get there on time to receive the incredible care that Guadeloupe has on offer, and to ensure a major reduction in the cost of the flight. In terms of the urgency of getting a patient there, so we all want the cost of care to be less, or many would love if the government of Montserrat assumed the cost. For me, cost is definitely an issue, but if you combine cost and quality of care together, there is your gold. It means, Madam Speaker, that if a patient has a stroke on Montserrat, and you send the patient to your receiving facility tomorrow because you cannot figure out your Medivac service, your patient does not stand a chance. But if your patient, having succumbed to the stroke now and having it made definite that this person needs to receive advanced care, if you get your patient to Guadeloupe now in 20 minutes, that costs so much less. That person has a chance of 2 days post-stroke to be walking out of the care facility with lipstick on, with high heel shoes on, and with handbag over their shoulder instead of lifelong paralysis. For heart attack, Madam Speaker, if we send the patient tomorrow, they will well and truly be dead, or they will go into cardiac arrest while waiting for your flight. If we send the patient now to Guadeloupe, 20 minutes away, they can have the coronary arteries stented, they can survive, and they can return to being functional members of the workforce, providing emotional, psychosocial, financial, and physical support to their families and their communities. Scrolling down past some things which I perhaps should not say. In further answering the question posed by Honorable Romeo, we can further explore our laws that obligate the government of Montserrat to covering the cost of overseas care. Certainly in Guernsey, in the Channel Islands, a more advanced civilization than ours, the cost of medical evacuation is covered by the government of Guernsey.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. May I ask the Honourable Minister, with the high cost of with the lack of specialist medical care on island, the high cost of Medivac, and the high cost of specialist care overseas, is she saying that her ministry has sufficient funds now to address those expenses where the locals can't afford it? Or will she need significantly more funds in the next year or two or beyond to address these needs?
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, as it pertains to medical evacuation to Guadeloupe, which to me is the obvious solution, the government of Montserrat has adequate funds to go ahead with the signing of a memorandum of understanding with Guadeloupe, which will provide us with a process where if a patient takes ill and presents to the hospital and a decision is made that the person needs to travel abroad for time-critical, life-saving care, that an intermediary organization in Guadeloupe is contacted. That organization makes contact with the hospital. The medical evacuation is arranged, and until our Honorable Deputy Premier's ministry has done the work, completed the work required to allow for night flying, at least it means if you show up at 2 a.m. and we have gotten you ready for Medivac by 3 a.m., at least by the very least by 6 a.m. you are ready to go, rather than the countless delays which happen to get patients off island. So the answer is, there are funds that we will have to spend by the 31st of March to sort out our medical evacuation service. This will allow the overall cost of care to people on Montserrat to be reduced, because simply the cost of travel will be reduced and the quality of care will go up, and therein will be our goal.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
Yes, Madam Speaker. My next question to the Honourable Minister. During the last sitting, the Honourable Minister acknowledged that significant harm, including loss of life, may occur when patients requiring urgent off-island care are forced to wait for treatment overnight due to the unavailability of nighttime Medivac services. Given that such situations are both foreseeable and recurrent, could the Honourable Minister inform this Honourable House what measures are being taken to mitigate the risk of potential negligence claims against both the government of Montserrat and the government of the United Kingdom, which have long been aware of this deficiency?
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My answer simply states that we are awaiting studies from BILT and studies commenced by the former Governor, Sarah Tucker. But it did not address what measures are being taken to mitigate the risk of potential negligence claims. So obviously, health is in a position of high risk in terms of negligence claims. From what I understand, though, there is a cap so that even if the Ministry of Health accepts wrong in terms of delays in medevac, or the government accepts wrong regarding the lack of night flying, there is very little compensation for patients in a lawsuit against the government of Montserrat.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
A supplemental, please. To avoid me asking this question again in this House, could the Honourable Minister tell me clearly what is responsible, or who is responsible for the hold-up? Is it that our government is not making a strong and forceful argument for medevac services, or is it that the British government and the governor are not taking it seriously? It's been 5 years, and remember, the last sitting you thought that it was not being done under the PDM government. But as the Honourable Minister said, it was stopped in 2019, November, just when we left office.
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, I'm sure that Honourable Romeo will have to ask this question again, and I don't blame him. It is a very difficult position to be in, to know that change can happen and change should happen and change will happen, but it just cannot happen fast enough on this island. For me, as it relates to the details of preferred provider network, I've been asking for this my entire time of being here, and stood on the platform and promised fast and efficient medical evacuation, and spent 11 years of my life campaigning for this. I recently noticed that Section 7.1 of the Public Health Act states that, except as the minister may otherwise direct, the chief medical officer shall discharge the functions conferred on the minister under this act. And so I really should ask our premier and our governor if, after finally getting into this ministry, the powers of minister have been inadvertently taken away from the minister, and that the chief medical officer actually acts as the minister in
Honorable
decisions.
Minister, just like I said earlier to the Honorable Premier, include only what is necessary in the response, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My final response to Honourable Romeo is that I'm in a very humbled, semi-useless position on this side when it comes to certain things, but we persist in pushing for the change that is needed to ensure that one day people on Montserrat will be able to receive care for their time-critical emergencies in a timely manner.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
Do not feel too bad, Honourable Minister. I think it's this entire House that's responsible for making a strong argument. My next question, Honourable Minister. Could the Honourable Minister of Education briefly inform this Honourable House of the principal challenges currently facing the provision of primary, secondary and tertiary education on Montserrat? And further, could she outline the key outcomes she aims to achieve over the next 2 to 5 years, together with the strategies and measures she intends to employ in order to realize those ambitions?
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I must thank our Permanent Secretary in Education for her hard work and the teamwork that went into outlining many of the problems in education and the solutions, and also the Permanent Secretary in Health, who's been very diligent in her approach at making progress. So not really trying to make it doom and gloom, but I find it very heartbreaking. The problems in education: previously underfunded and underdeveloped special educational needs and support programs. For this, over the past year, we've managed to create a human resource framework for a robust special education program to include a special educational needs coordinator, speech and language therapist, dedicated personal assistants and teaching assistants. We also await a behavioral therapist and an education psychologist. So the framework required to ensure that students are having assessments done and are having solutions to their special ed problems. I must point out that in the meantime, we've had the hard work of volunteers. So we've had Dr. Carol Tute, education psychologist. We've also had a US team that has been helping many of our students electronically for some time. And we look forward to, in early 2026, once things go smoothly with our special educational needs cabinet paper, we're expecting in 2026 that we will open a unit that will act as a base for many of the programs, which will include instruction and activity and assessments for special educational students. It's worth noting that special ed affects many students to varying degrees, and if students are provided with the right support, they will be able to fulfill their potential, and they will be equal to other students in fulfilling personal goals and in contributing to national development. Number two would be the lack of a technical subjects program. So a technical subjects program with deficits and bored and disengaged students. We have, this is in particular at the Montserrat Secondary School, we have begun conversations with a technical school in Trinidad, and in a meeting next week, we shall solidify our plans more clearly to define what a technical arm at the Montserrat Secondary School would look like, allowing students of Montserrat to benefit from some of the 32 CBQ subjects offered by the Caribbean Examinations Council. And this will create more exciting and hands-on school programs at the Montserrat Secondary School, which at the same time will ensure both workforce strengthening and will allow students better bargaining power for better pay in the workforce, and allows them, if they wish, the opportunity to access tertiary education abroad with these technical subjects. Number three would be the lack of a teacher training college, inadequate guidance on continued education, unclear decisions on curriculum. We have broadened the conversation to include Dr. Gertrude Schott. She is a PhD educator and a professor at Middlesex University in the UK. She is extremely well published, and Dr. Schott and her colleague, Rudy Page, who is a policy implementation specialist, through new approaches will help us to grow education, allowing Montserrat to once rise again as a leader in education in the Caribbean. And this will include new approaches to training teachers, educating students, and will allow us to create the confident, critical thinkers in our population of young people who will allow Montserrat to progress to a new age of development and economic progress. Number four would be the struggle of teachers. We have been working on better teacher engagement so that at least they can be heard and more involved in the planning and progress that education envisions. In 2026, I intend to continue the efforts to get teachers onto free healthcare, the free healthcare that police, fire, and medical staff enjoy as essential workers. It is really important that we support teachers who are essential workers and professionals in their own right. The individuals who educate and inspire all of our children to become professionals of all kinds themselves. Number four would be buildings in a state of disrepair. We are finally getting somewhere with securing funds for buildings in need of repair. Thank you very much to the FCDO and Ministry of Finance for prioritizing the needs of our teachers and students in terms of making the buildings safer for the students and teachers to work in. In the meantime, many of our teachers have worked in very unsafe conditions, and this has been very unsatisfactory. And we hope to correct the problem soon with the funds that we shall receive, as we have had teachers who have even reported major health problems from the state of the buildings that they must operate in, and teachers who have described electrical problems that greatly put their lives at risk. Number 4 would be safeguarding concerns in our student population. So very many of our 599 students in primary and secondary go home to empty houses at 2:15 and 3 p.m. and are at major risk of harm and exposure to predators. We continue to seek grant funding for after-school programs in community centers. And in the meantime, we are thankful for the funding we received through the Ministry of Finance earlier this year for the Safe Summer Project, a project which, free of charge to parents, kept students not only safe this summer, but also engaged in many interesting and useful activities such as swimming, agriculture, cultural activities, art and craft, and costume design. So many thanks to our teachers, our teaching assistants, and other members of the community who spent the summer of 2026 with our students. I cannot thank you enough for your participation in this program, and we look forward to doing this again next year. In the meantime, private providers are invited to formulate programs which keep our students safe and engaged during the other holiday periods. And please, if they could, feel free to contact the Ministry of Education to take opportunities for learning how to safeguard children on the island. I would like to thank our Commissioner of Police and our new safeguarding leads on Montserrat for stressing the importance of safeguarding our children over this past year and for creating safe and suitable referral pathways for students, for children who have been the victims of abuse. And for us as parliamentarians, please remember to embrace safeguarding, not only just of children, but also of vulnerable adults, including our elderly in your portfolios. And number 7, students and parents report the problem of students being streamed down to lower sets and wish they could have the support required to allow them to remain in higher sets at the Montserrat Secondary School, in which there are more opportunities. We in education have managed to remove the outdated cognitive ability test, or leveling test, which was a 20-year-old, truly expired test that was no longer being used anywhere else in the world, and which was known to cause discrimination and create further socioeconomic division. Unfortunately, the streaming at the Montserrat Secondary School is still suboptimal. Many of the students and parents are frustrated, and in too many cases, the students become demotivated and even depressed. We have sought support to correct this system from professionals who can help us with our efforts to reform the Montserrat Secondary School so that the students there can have every reason to be motivated and hopeful.
I recognize the Honorable Premier.
A supplemental, please.
Sorry, the Honorable Romeo.
That's okay. Madam Speaker, while I support and admire the ambitious plans, which are basic needs to our people, I must ask the Honourable Minister, are the funds you're receiving now to address education sufficient to cover these plans that you have? Or will you need significantly more than you're getting right now to achieve the plans that you have outlined?
Recognize the Honorable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Education has not received adequate funds for years. At the end of our budget support meeting in January of this year, we were told that health and education would receive $3.85 million. 2 months later, we were informed that health would receive $3.8 million, and that education, if education managed to hire a project manager who was as effective as the project manager for health transformation, that then education would at least be able to receive $500,000. Of course, due to the administrative delays that occur within government. I think interviews are only now taking place to hire such a project manager. So education has no money. A couple of months ago, we did out our new spend request in a similar manner to earlier this year in the budget support mission to request the funding that is required for education to progress. Presently, we have any number of projects that require funding. So far, we have, at the very least, been included in the list that goes to the budget support mission in January of this year. And I'd like to thank our Honorable Premier and the Financial Secretary for ensuring that we have been included in this list. And in the meantime, I can only pray that a philanthropist or an organization out there would like to donate to some of our programs in education. And very, very close to my heart is obviously this after-school program to keep our children on Montserrat safe in the afternoon period. As you know, salaries on Montserrat are very small, and the parents are out there doing 2 and 3 jobs just to put food on the table. And unfortunately, this means that very often in the afternoons, our children are looking after themselves. So in order to keep them safe and in order to have them adequately engaged in activities that will further develop them in education, we simply pray for funds. And once again, I'd like to thank the Permanent Secretary of Education, who has well and truly found it very frustrating not having access to the funds we need for our programs. And we hope and pray that in January, things will turn around for us. We are at least hopeful that our human resource needs were taken on separately by the government. So through the fact that the needs were taken on separately, we were able to hire many of the persons in for the special ed structure that I described. Also, there is the funds for the special ed unit that we're going to have hopefully open early in the new year. The funds were actually taken from health to education. So we thank the Ministry of Health, the Permanent Secretary of Health, for facilitating this. And we look forward to further collaboration between the two ministries, as obviously health and education are very close together and are both extremely vital for our population and for the development of Montserrat in a safe way.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My next question is to the Honourable Minister of Lands and Housing. Could the Honourable Minister responsible for sports inform this Honourable House of the estimated total cost for a basketball team, inclusive of coach and management personnel, to travel to Antigua for participation in a basketball competition?
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the estimated total cost for a basketball team of 15 persons, inclusive of the coach and management personnel, to travel to Antigua for participation in a 5-day basketball competition is 45,000 EC dollars, Madam Speaker. This amount comprises 15,000 for travel, 20,000 for accommodation, 10,000 for meals. These expenditures collectively represent the full costs required to facilitate the team's participation in such a competition. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
A supplemental, please, Madam Speaker. May I ask the Minister, how affordable is this for the Basketball Association and for the ministry? If it's just one tournament, they have other tournaments to attend. How affordable is this?
So, Madam
I
Speaker,
recognize the Honorable Minister of Sports.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we do recognize that travel throughout the region and travel to these events are expensive. Madam Speaker, as such, what we did was put in place a draft sports calendar, and that draft sports calendar would be for each team and association to state basically what events they plan to go to so that we can further budget going forward. A lot of the sports organizations, Madam Speaker, have actually sent in their draft calendar, And as such, Madam Speaker, that is the reason why going forward, we have put in a new spend to greatly increase the sports budget, specifically for these, as we realize that competition is what will drive excellence in our athletes, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the Honourable Romeo.
My next question to the Honourable Minister. Could the Honourable Minister inform this Honourable House of his intended course of action regarding the reconstruction of the 410 houses located in Davy Hill and Lookout, which have exceeded their effective lifespan and are no longer considered hurricane resistant? And further, could he state what financial obligations, if any, will fall upon the owners themselves as compared with the projected cost of the government for their replacement?
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Housing.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, just for the record, there are no 410 houses located in Davy Hill. 410 houses, they're actually only located in Lookout. Secondly, Madam Speaker, the 410 houses in Lookout are privately owned, except 6 which are in government ownership. Madam Speaker, the Honourable Member refers to the following in his question for today, and I'll state from his question. The reconstruction of the 410 built houses located in Davy Hill and Lookout, which have exceeded their lifespan and are no longer considered hurricane resilient. Madam Speaker, neither me nor the member are, as I would say, professionals on this, so I will read the executive summary of the structural appraisal and condition assessment of the 410 houses at Lookout, and the report states as follows. It says, given the relatively good condition of the superstructure of the houses, along with consideration for their age, retrofitting is an economically feasible option. However, it is advised that any decision to retrofit the houses be implemented at the earliest with priority given to restoring their structural integrity. In response to the question by the Honourable Member, Madam Speaker, it was pointed out, Madam Speaker, in responding to the question, I will point out that the government of Montserrat had adhered to the recommendations of the report. In 2022, Madam Speaker, the government of Montserrat facilitated rehabilitation works on approximately 35 houses in the Lookout area. That's 410 and the ones in private ownership. And that amounted to a cost of $358,000, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this rehabilitation work has resulted in the strengthened structural integrity of the houses and improved health and safety standard for the residents. When one visits Lookout today, Madam Speaker, there is tangible evidence of the rehabilitation works that have been carried out on the 410 units for all to see. Additionally, the ministry is helping existing 410 homeowners to carry out additional rehabilitation work through its new Rehabilitation Assistance Program, which was created and rolled out recently. Madam Speaker, I find it very ironic that the above reference report, which came with a condition assessment of the 410 houses at Lookout, was completed in 2013. Madam Speaker, I hope that the Honourable Member doesn't take offence, but he was leader of government business in 2014 to 2019. Unfortunately, it was only in 2022 that the Honourable Crenson Buffon, who was Minister responsible for housing, and that the funding was actually used for rehabilitation work on the 410 houses at Lookout. Madam Speaker, the government of Montserrat, however, is cognizant of the need to provide adequate and affordable housing for its residents. The government therefore continues to play an enabling role in facilitating persons in general who wish to reconstruct or rehabilitate their homes through any of the following initiatives. The Materials Grant Scheme, Madam Speaker, and this is a provision grant of $40,000 in materials to provide the equity needed to construct or reconstruct a dwelling house. Final Assistance Grant, the provision of a conditional grant of $40,000 to assist with leveraging a mortgage to construct or reconstruct a dwelling. The applicant must be able to raise the additional sums outside the grant amount to complete under this scheme, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we also have the HOME program, and that's government's low-interest mortgage scheme, which provides mortgages at rates of 3% for incomes below $2,500 and 5% above 2,500 but not exceeding 5,000 to construct or reconstruct a dwelling. Madam Speaker, as the Honourable Deputy Premier would have said, there are duty-free concessions that will be coming on the importation of building materials and household items. Madam Speaker, further, a proper analysis would be required to ascertain any replacement costs between any homeowner and the government. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the Honourable Romeo.
A supplemental, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Minister is correct that the study was done in 2013. In order to ask my question, I must ask him, is he aware that in 2018-19, the CIPREG program began under PDM, mentions $14 million that would have been, if allowed, been used eventually to address housing in lookout, and not just to paint them, but to rebuild them to some extent. And is he aware of the CIPREG Annual Review 2024, published in February 2025, which states, Indicator 2.2, much of the existing social housing estate, 200 units, is well beyond its intended lifespan and remains in a state of disrepair. This is a study done by the British themselves, and the
I
review,
recognize, sorry,
Madam Speaker,
Honourable Romeo. I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, we seem to tolerate a lot in this House, but on a point of order, is that really a supplementary question? I don't see a supplementary there. I don't know if you do.
Could you ask your supplementary question, please?
As a preface to my supplementary question, Section 2.2 states, because he may have confused the Minister, so the Minister should hear it again, much of the existing social housing estate, 200 units, which I'm sure includes Lookout and Davy Hill.
Yes,
Is
but is
Madam
that...
Speaker, on a point of order
Just a
again.
minute, Honourable Premier. Is that in relation to something you don't understand?
Absolutely, Madam
response?
Speaker, because his answer, the question
So let
asked...
us get to the supplement.
I am, Madam Speaker, I'm trying
Please.
to.
Yes, let's get to the
His
supplement.
answer refers, the question asked about being hurricane resistant and the lifespan of these houses. And the British themselves are saying that much of the existing social housing, 200 units, is well beyond its intended lifespan and remains in a state of disrepair, which suggests if they're past their lifespan, there needs to be significant reconstruction. So I'm asking the Minister, is he aware of these facts that were published in 2025, 2024, 2025, February 2025, during this government's time?
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Housing.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm not even sure which part is the supplementary, but I'll just answer all of them. Madam Speaker, if the Honourable Member is stating that he got 14 million for housing, then there's absolutely no evidence that he did anything with that money. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, if the Honourable Member listened in this Honourable House, especially to my ministerial statement, he would have heard me say that when I came into government, I met a report that stated that we needed $9.7 million for social housing. And Madam Speaker, because we're in the Legislative Assembly, we should not be opinionated as to think about which houses those are, because the Honourable Member does not know if they relate to the said Lookout, Forced End houses. So, Madam Speaker, we have already admitted that. We have already put forward in our new spend budget for social maintenance, which we do every year. So that's just to answer the Honourable Member, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
I recognize the Honourable Romeo.
Madam Speaker, for the record, I did not say
No, Honourable Romeo. Number 26, Section 26 of the Standing Orders states that there should be no debate or speech on the responses. You asked a supplementary and he provided the response. Let us move on to the next question, please. We keep doing this. And I've been tolerant. I've said it in the last sitting. And I think that maybe a firmer stance would have to be taken. Please, let us move on.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I was not initiating a debate, I must say. Just giving clarity. But let's move on to the next question. Could the Honourable Minister for Matleys briefly inform this Honourable House of the principal challenges currently facing the provision of social housing, especially for the vulnerable, including single mothers, non-nationals and evacuees, and those on and off island? And could he outline the key outcomes he aims to achieve over the next 2 to 5 years, together with the strategies and measures she intends to employ in order to realize those ambitions? Let me repeat the question. Could the Honourable Minister of Matleys briefly inform this Honourable House of the principal challenges currently facing the provision of social housing, especially for the vulnerable and including single mothers, non-nationals and evacuees on and off island? And could he outline the key outcomes he aims to achieve over the next 2 to 5 years, together with the strategies and measures he intends to employ in order to realize those ambitions?
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Honourable Member asked a similar question in the Honourable House at the meeting in January 21st, 2025. At the meeting, the question was as follows. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture, Lands, Housing and Environment has been in office for some 3 months now. Can the Honourable Minister tell this Honourable House what are the 3 main challenges he faces in addressing social housing on Montserrat and how he plans to address them? Madam Speaker, the response then and the response today in regards to the main issues are as follows. The maintenance of the social housing stock, funding for the creation of new social housing stock, and access to land for housing. Madam Speaker, when you review the manifesto of this administration, it clearly sets out an agenda for housing and construction in short, middle, and long term. These include the following: a review of the government's housing policy to ensure that the housing is accessible for all residents. And again, Madam Speaker, in my ministerial statement, I would have stated that we have started that. Madam Speaker, there's a refurbishment to the government housing stock, and also, Madam Speaker, to ensure that affordable housing is accessible to residents. Madam Speaker, there's a 4th item that I would like to talk about, and that's the Financial Assistance Program, which is a well-established program and a successful program under the social housing policy agenda. Based on this policy agenda, hold on, Madam Speaker. Based on this policy agenda, the government of Montserrat has sought innovative ways to provide housing solutions for all eligible persons on Montserrat, to include young persons. Over the years, individuals have benefited from the initiatives that have been implemented. The government of Montserrat continues to ensure that the policy agenda outlined above is met through the following, Madam Speaker, and I will list them and explain them. Number 1, the maintenance of social housing stock. Since the onset of the volcanic crisis, the government of Montserrat has been involved in the construction and management of social housing. The social housing portfolio is comprised of approximately the same 200 units that the Honourable Member mentioned, which ranges from traditional concrete structures with timber, concrete and galvanized covers. Madam Speaker, there are also several units under construction, and those are also known as the 410 ones, so those are to add to the 200. The bulk of the social housing portfolio is located in Lookout and Drummonds. These areas are known for harsh environmental conditions dominated by saline mist, and this has had a major impact on the buildings. As a result, the maintenance of those buildings is high. Recognizing this and that the continued deterioration of buildings poses a health and safety risk to the tenants, the government has put in place a preventative maintenance program and also a corrective maintenance for the social housing stock. Condition surveys have been undertaken, and currently there is ongoing corrective maintenance program taking place on housing stock. Funding in the amount of 1.3 million has been approved under the CIPREG Addendum program to facilitate this maintenance. The work that has undertaken was designed to make the buildings more resilient and allow continuity of use. Madam Speaker, this project was completed in April of this year, and approximately 33 units were rehabilitated. Additional funding, Madam Speaker, through a new spend submission is being sought to continue maintenance of the additional housing units. Madam Speaker, we move on to number 2, which is the new social housing stock. The demand for social housing is another challenge, Madam Speaker. There's a housing demand wait list of persons who require support, and continued funding is required based on this demand. We would admit this, Madam Speaker, and there's some 150-something persons on that list. At the onset of the volcanic crisis, the government of Montserrat constructed several family units at various locations around the island as a rapid response to the housing needs at the time. Some of these units, Madam Speaker, are still occupied. The decanting of these units and rehousing the occupants is a high priority in the government of Montserrat housing program. Funding has been secured under the CPREC addendum to start phase 1 work at Drummond's for the installation of infrastructure and the construction of housing units to replace the family units on that site. The installation of infrastructure at Drummond's is completed, Madam Speaker, and the construction of an apartment building with 4 one-bedroom units has commenced. Madam Speaker, a new spend submission has been made for the full build-out of the Drummond's phase 1. Access to land and provision of service lots, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the government of Montserrat has recognized the importance of the availability and provision of land for development purposes, and more so housing development. The ministry has taken the initiative to ensure that lands for potential development are identified. This exercise has been carried out by the Land and Survey Department in conjunction with the Montserrat Land Development Authority and the Physical Planning Unit. There are pockets of land which are government-owned, and these sites are being mapped and quantified. Additionally, these sites are being assessed in terms of potential for housing, subdivision development, and the carrying capacity of such sites. Recently, Madam Speaker, preliminary work has been undertaken on the development of an access road from Lookout to Drummond's. This development, which is in its early stages, has open access to land in that area, which can be utilized for housing development. Madam Speaker, the intention here is to make service lots available to individuals, which would include young persons and single-parent households, once that criteria is satisfied. Residential service lots are targeted at landless persons who demonstrate the ability to secure the funds needed to build a dwelling house within a maximum period of 12 months. The beneficiary will be required to raise the funds necessary to construct a dwelling house. These lots have been used as collateral for mortgages in some instances, and several homes have been constructed by individuals who would have benefited from the provision of a service lot. Recently, Madam Speaker, preliminary work was undertaken on the development of an, Madam Speaker, number 4, Madam Speaker, the Final Assistance Program. Madam Speaker, this is one such initiative in the form of material grants and financial assistance grants to improve their housing conditions or provide access to financing for home mortgages. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to say that there is a new spend submission for this to increase the funding available for these programs. Madam Speaker, to elaborate on the financial assistance programs, the government of Montserrat provides housing solutions through a number of initiatives which will span over the next 2 to 5 years to include, 1, the housing assistance program, and I won't go through them fully, Madam Speaker, since I would have mentioned them in a previous question, the home program, the service lot program, and also, Madam Speaker, number 4, fostering public-private partnership. Madam Speaker, this government sees the role of the private sector as a major player in housing development, and we have not overlooked that. To this end, Government of Montserrat is hoping to partner with private institutions and investors to develop housing projects, to create mechanisms to trigger the construction sector, creating employment, giving a boost to the economy, and providing affordable housing for residents. We have to this date, Madam Speaker, several interested companies, but as a government, it is our duty to ensure the affordability of these projects for our locals and diaspora alike. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
A supplemental, please, Madam Speaker. Honorable Minister, to achieve these ambitious plans and address maintenance, repairs, build new houses, social and otherwise, PPP, you name it. Will your ministry require significantly more funds than is available to you, or has been available to you, or to us over the past few years, in the next 2 to 5 years? Or will similar funds to what was given over the past 2 to 5 years be sufficient?
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Housing.
Madam Speaker, we do recognize that we need significantly more funds, so we have created new spends just for that purpose, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. My next question is to the Honourable Minister of Finance and Access, Premier. Honourable Premier, during the recent meeting with ministers during the recent meetings with Montserrat's diaspora in London, the Honourable Premier stated that his government intends to decrease Montserrat's dependency on UK over the next 5 years. Can the Honourable Premier tell this Honourable House to what extent or how does the high cost of access pose a barrier to growth and increased financial dependence on the UK government, and what he is doing and going to do to change this predicament?
I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, as this administration has stated repeatedly in different fora, it is our intention to reduce Montserrat's dependency on aid from the UK. If the Honourable Member listened to all the presentations during the diaspora engagement session, I clearly outlined that strategic partnership with private sector firms, leveraging Montserrat resources and improving access are the main pillars towards achieving greater economic independence. Improving access to the island is a fundamental part of Montserrat's sustainable development, and working with the FCDO to secure a 3-year commitment will allow for increased surety and more affordable rates for access, as government will be able to commit to contracts beyond a single-year period. Madam Speaker, there are initiatives which are being pursued with potential investors. However, access by itself will not generate economic development, but it is a part of a larger picture of other development initiatives complementing each other.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
During my next question, Madam Speaker, during the recent joint ministerial council meetings, 5 leaders of the British Overseas Territories publicly expressed concern regarding what they characterize as inequitable and colonial treatment of British Overseas Territories relative to Crown dependencies. Could the Honourable Premier inform this Honourable House why he was not signatory or a participant in this collective representation? B, whether he concurs with or departs from the position advanced by the aforementioned leaders, and C, what his own considered position is on the matters raised.
I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, kindly permit me to provide a single response. The Caribbean Overseas Territories Caucus discussed these matters at a breakfast meeting hosted by the Montserrat delegation at its Montserrat UK offices conference room. The Yokota plenary then discussed these matters, and there was unanimous consent to take the matters forward by the chairman of Yokota, and this was done.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo. And please, could you indicate which question you're asking? Because
Question
you're
6,
moving on.
my last question.
Okay.
Could the Honourable Minister briefly inform this Honourable House of the principal challenges currently being encountered in securing funding for geothermal development, and further outline the strategies and measures he intends to employ in order to successfully obtain such funding?
I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, the approach being taken by the government of Montserrat is to seek private sector investment to develop additional geothermal wells to create other industries associated with geothermal energy. Geothermal development has faced challenges across several attempts. The early market engagement in 2017 and the 2022 request for proposals did not produce a viable agreement. Negotiations began in November of 2023 with the preferred bidder, but the process did not advance to conclusion. Required financial support was not secured, key cost-related matters remain unresolved, and the proposal's validity period had expired. Cabinet reviewed the matter in April of 2025 and accepted the justification for ending negotiations. Cabinet also considered the broader policy implications, including the need for clearer development pathways and ensuring that the geothermal resource remains available for consideration by other parties. The Geothermal Resource Development Act is now in effect, and the steering committee has been established with a due diligence and scoring framework to assess any future applications. Under the Green Energy Transition Program, the wellhead maintenance works have been completed, flow testing has been completed, and the associated reports are awaited. The program will also examine aspects of the wider regulatory framework, including tariff-related matters to support future development. Any future approach to geothermal development will need to comply with the requirements of the Procurement Act and the associated regulations, including competitive processes, evaluation criteria, and verification of financial and technical capacity before any award or negotiation can proceed. There has been renewed interest from potential investors, and the BUILD team is preparing an updated approach for evaluating expressions of interest within the established governance framework. Any forward movement will be based on technical evidence, financial viability, and the requirements of the Act.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo.
A supplemental, please, Madam Speaker. And before I ask it, just so the House knows, I'm not asking the other questions to avoid what happened with Honorable Lewis. I don't think the answers were helpful, so I'm not going to ask them. So my supplemental is simple, Madam Speaker. Could the Honorable Premier inform this Honorable House if he's going to require further funding from the UK government or more than was provided to the previous government for the further, what did he say, gaining technical evidence and moving forward with geothermal power?
I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, I'll repeat for the benefit of the honourable member. The approach being undertaken by the government of Montserrat is to seek private sector investment to develop additional geothermal wells to create other industries associated with geothermal energy. And Madam Speaker, while I'm on my feet, may I ask if he's withdrawing the questions or he's just not asking them? There's a distinction.
Honorable Romeo, are you withdrawing completely?
I'm not asking them.
Okay, if he's not asking them, he's withdrawing them.
Really?
Motions.
Madam Speaker.
I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you for recognizing me, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to move a motion for the Honorable House to take a break for lunch at this time and to return at 2 p.m.
I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I second the motion.
It has been moved and seconded that this Honorable House adjourn for lunch until 2 p.m. All those in favor, say aye. Those against, nay. I think the ayes have it. This Honorable House now adjourns for lunch until 2 p.m.